So, good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to the Physichat podcast. Today, very delighted to be joined by Waldo Vazquez, someone who I've known for 14 or 15 years now. So, welcome, Waldo.
Well, thank you, Andrew, and I'm glad to be here. This is exciting times, strange times, we could all say, but definitely exciting times for BTE as a company and our relationship with Andrew and IPRS. You know, Andy and his team. Again, as Andy said, I've known him for close 14, 15 years, and with many friends in the UK. So it's exciting future, exciting times, new stuff coming through, new research, new planning. So looking forward to this podcast.
Great, excellent. Well, it was going to run for up to an hour, so I know Waldo's always got a lot to say, which will be great to listen to. So what I'd like to do with today really is that, again, you and I have worked together for a long time, but I'd like to talk a bit more about you and obviously the things that we've got coming up with BTE as well. So just starting off, I'd be really interested to know how you came to take the job at BTE. How did that come about?
That was about 15 years ago. I've been working for a number of manufacturers related to the industry and not related to the industry, meaning the medical device industry. But they're usually multinational companies, large corporations. And there was an advertisement for a position at BTE Technologies that I had seen in some kind of electronic media. It piqued my interest, and you looked at all the requisites on the job, and I met something like 14 out of 18 requisites that were there. It was a weird number of requisites, and I said, well, if they can find somebody who meets all 18, fine. If not, then let's throw it in there. I'd be interested to find out. I had a.
What were the four that you didn't meet, Waldo? I'm intrigued to know what you didn't meet.
I had to have full color hair instead of the gray hair that I had at the time. Now it's white. But now I don't recall, Andy, but it was they were very specific to the industry in terms of physical therapy, rehabilitation, very specific to the industry, engineering. So in the end, I had an interview on the phone with some of the colleagues that later became colleagues at BTE. I was I was in Florida in a meeting in Tampa, Florida, and Chuck Weatherton, which is the president of BTE, and some of our listeners in the podcast today may have met in the past visits to the UK. Gave me a call. I was at a hotel in the afternoon. My day was over. We talked for about an hour, and when I got back to Washington, stopped by the office, and at the end of a short 20, 30-minute exchange, Chuck and I, face to face, he thought I would be a good match, and he extended an offer. And as they say, the rest is history. I've been heavily involved in the development of our international market and our domestic market, products, software, marketing direction, campaigns, and general direction of the company. It's been very, very rewarding in the past 15 years.
And in terms of that, what made it? I know you sold yourself to Chuck, but what was it about what he was saying to you that made you excited about taking this particular opportunity?
I think at the time, and it's still valid today, there is a leadership position that BTE holds within the industry. We're not the cheapest product out there. We are certainly, we play at a level of high scientific value, high clinical value. Everything we do, it starts with a clinical question: is this going to be better for somebody or not? And those were key elements of it. Clearly, our leadership position as a pioneer on what most of us call today functional rehab was a very attractive piece of this. The company at the time had very aggressive plans of growth in the international market. he represented maybe something like 3% of the company's revenue, 3 to 5% of the company's revenue at the time. And you know, we wanted to make it a lot bigger, in which we did, and we have. And today accounts for about, you know, over 40% of our, or the company's revenues. And it's very rewarding to be able to do that. The expansion in the market to different countries. And that's something that if you are in the business side of this, it's always very interesting, because you have to accommodate for cultural sensitivities, for different ways of doing things. You know, elbow flexion extension is an elbow flexion extension, but people approach it very different across borders, and it's always a challenge. It always brings a new opportunity for us to, at least for me, to learn, and for BTE to get better.
Yeah, I think so. I mean, I think one of the unique things that we've had, and I've had over my time involved in this area, is that BTE's got a very family-orientated feel of the company, as well as being very progressive in the technology that it produces. So, and I think that, from my perspective, it starts from where the company actually began. So could you just give me a bit of a background of where BTE actually came to be?
Yeah. We have two founders, Dr. Raymond Curtis and Mr. John Ingalichev. Ingalichev was an engineer, actually a mechanical engineer. His specialty was heating, ventilation, and air conditioning systems. And Raymond Curtis was a hand surgeon. In the United States, is highly respected. And as in many ways the father of hand surgery in the United States. Our National Hand Center for Rehab is named after him through an act of Congress, the Curtis National Hand Center. It's located in Baltimore, Maryland. But he was, as many young men of the time in the 40s and 50s, you went to university, you graduated, you joined the Armed Forces of the United States, and during that time we certainly had a little conflict called World War II. So there was a lot of emphasis in creating rehabilitation procedures for the GIs and the Allied forces that were suffering, of course, injuries on the battlefield. And the state of rehab at the time was, compared to what it is today, you could consider somewhat prehistoric. It was pretty much a linear movement, and there really wasn't that much science to it. Raymond Curtis, he went ahead and started thinking about a way of doing this differently. He could clearly do surgery on the hand, but why are we doing surgery on that hand? Of course, at the time was, can somebody hold an object, a rifle? Can somebody load a cannon? Can somebody pull on a rope if they're on a ship? Can somebody pilot a plane? So there were functions that we're trying to restore. So he started looking at how to do this a little bit different. And through the years, he experimented with several different techniques, technologies that were available. And he eventually received a grant from the National Institute of Health here in the United States to develop a tool of what he envisioned. At the time, I think it was something around $50,000. This is now in the 70s, which was considered a huge amount for rehabilitation. And he developed several, together with some corporate partners, several options, but they really were not practical. They were rather significant in the terms of footprint that would occupy on a clinic. And in conversation with his friend and neighbor, John Ingalichev, they decided to take a different look at this. And John, coming from the engineering side, understood what Raymond Curtis wanted to do. And they put together from parts from a dental chair to auto parts, the world's first work simulator. And that piece today sits in the Museum of Hand Surgery and Therapy. And it was a breakthrough in the way rehab was being approached. And as I mentioned earlier, the term functional rehab became almost you know, homogeneous through the profession. It was simple. It was upper extremity, but it not only it looked at, you know, why we're doing, for example, rehab on a hand or hand grip, and that may have been because we want to lift something or because we want to drive a vehicle, and looking at activities they live in and how to simulate those activities either from work or from daily living into a short footprint, supervised under the care of a rehab specialist, and then being able to track the progress. So be able to collect objective data that allow for objective dosing of exercise and what type of exercise would be required. So it was a huge breakthrough. That was by then, that was 1979 when BTE is founded. So we are now in our 41st year. Actually, this month of September is when we celebrate our anniversary.
It's amazing. So you've still got a very strong relationship with the Curtis Hand Centre. So does that play any sort of role in the company directly anymore?
No, they obviously the Curtis National Hand Center, it's relatively close to our office. It's, you're looking about a 30-minute drive north of where we are. We are located right between Baltimore and Washington, DC. They're up in Baltimore. It is obviously a reference point for us. We cooperate with them in terms of sometimes they're undertaking specific exercise or they're trying to innovate on something with the equipment that they have, and we provide clinical assistance for them. And we support them in other roles, but no, there's no direct involvement anymore between the Curtis National Hand Center and BTE at a corporate level or a formal corporate level. It's more of a give me a call. I need some help. Can you stop by? We have this patient. We got to figure out, have you ever done anything like this with the system? And so again, we learn from our interactions around the United States, around the world, and when we propagate that information through our users. And so we get a lot of that, and they support us too. I mean, it's a two-way street in terms of our cooperation.
I think that's particularly noticeable from my perspective is that the Pulver Tapped Hand Centre based in Derby over here, they've got a very strong relationship with the Curtis Hand Centre. So Professor Frank Burke, who's still based out of there, they still liaise, and they've got 3 prime assistants now. So it's really great from my perspective, and I'm sure your perspective, to see that ongoing relationship between these big centres.
Yeah, our first, really, Andy, that's a great point, because and I'm glad you touch on it. Our first major expansion outside of the United States was to the UK. And Dr. Burke was instrumental in that. Dr. Burke was a good friend of Dr. Curtis. He saw the need for such equipment, and in many ways, what transpired in the UK influenced the original products that BTE developed. There were colleagues, they talked, they exchanged ideas. And clearly, I can attest that the UK has been instrumental. The rehab specialists in the UK have been instrumental in the product development for not only the hand products but the entire line. Today, we enjoy not only Derby, but we throughout the entire UK, from Northern Ireland to Wales to England, and it's been a very collaborative and fruitful effort between the 2 markets, the 2 countries, the two sides of the pond. You guys speak English a little weird, but we take it as it is.
Yeah, no, it's definitely true. Actually, 4 years ago, I just got notified on my social media that I was actually getting a tour from you. We had a group of about 10 people over in Washington coming over for the primus training, but also the impressive sightseeing that you personally also give us as well. So yeah, I just got the reminder of that. So I might share some photos when we go on the podcast.
Well, if you're going to go that route, hopefully you do talk about my incredible abilities in the kitchen. So not just the impressive sights around the city of Washington.
No, absolutely. The barbecue at the end of the trip is always that's the main reason I always make sure I go on the trip as well. So, but no, genuinely, I think that's a key part of BTE's side as well is that relationship and the ongoing training that we definitely want people to be doing very well with the product, and you guys are absolutely great partners on that as well.
Yeah, I heard this morning on TV, one of the morning shows that, you know, the one of the greatest things you can do in life is to develop the ability to listen. And we as a company, we keep that in mind. You know, we always want to listen. We want to listen to our customer. We want to make sure that there is that interaction, that belly to belly contact. And that's what makes us better. And brings up, you know, our weaknesses, our strengths, and how to really to create a better product, which ultimately it is really for the benefit of patients, and the rehabilitation needs of millions of people at this point around the world. So
I think that's a really good point to bring me on to my next question on this. So you've got an amazing story for how the work simulator / primers were created. But what drives the other technology that you've got? So you've got several different products that you've got now. Is it always based on that clinical demand?
it always starts with a clinical need. And I'll give you an example of our, most recent product, the one that was just released this year, called the EVJ. And the EVJ is a portable unit. It's an evaluator type unit. It is used to collect data, and it was designed to do such an operation. You had to meet certain criteria, and he had to meet criteria that he was quick to use, easy to learn, so you don't have to go through extensive training to be able to use it. Then be able to collect the data, maintain data integrity, and be able to transfer that data. And that data could be either transferred through electronic medical records, or it could be transferred for some research facility somewhere. And the data that they wanted to collect was range of motion and strength. So range of motion on the neck cervical area, so flexion, extension, rotation, lateral, and then range of motion for the upper and lower extremities. Strength, also range of motion for the lumbar area. Strength for, again, upper extremity and lower extremities, it will be isometric strength. That request, that idea, that entire evolution, the genesis of that product was a clinical need. The government of Japan approached us through our dealer requesting such a device. They needed something that they could collect data as they went to visit. They have an extensive network of visiting therapists that they go over to people's residence and they go through evaluations and some low level type rehab, and they prefer to do that at their homes rather than having to bring them to a central location. So they had that very specific need. That need led us to, this product also has a purpose on the functional capacity evaluation side. It also has a purpose on the athletic side. It also has a purpose in the educational side. Currently, there are two relatively significant developments at the university level where the acquisition of the product to be used as lab equipment in the development and the education of new rehab specialists, new OTs and PTs, athletic trainers, sports scientists that are coming through, so that they can not only learn how to do these data collection, activities, but also publish the research, be able to understand what, the effect of certain rehab modalities would have in certain conditions. So it's very exciting. These are things that we did not think about at the time, but it started with a clinical need. Next thing we know, the engineering schools, several engineering schools have been now shown some interest in the piece of equipment because, again, you look at engineers who are designing cars, airplanes, equipment, factories, and they're looking at that interaction and trying to understand what the human body is capable of doing so that they can design better products themselves, whatever it is that they are. A little bit of ergonomics. So whatever the product that they are manufacturing. But again, everything starts with a clinical need. That clinical need, it's going to be, do we have something that we could do that for or not, or do we need to go produce something else? Prior to the EVJ is the Centrum. There was a clinical need to be able to isolate eccentric contractions in the lower extremities. We didn't have anything in the portfolio, so we went ahead and designed the Centrum. And today, it still sits as the king of in terms of technology on isolating eccentric contractions on the lower extremities. And it's, again, across the board, from geriatrics to world-class athletes are using it. As a matter of fact, currently we are at the NBA bubble in Orlando, Florida. It's one is sitting out there, and it's being used by several players. As the group gets smaller and they move from bigger hotel facilities, the equipment is being moved to the new hotels as the teams progress, so that they have access to that. That was the choice of the team, not us. They requested one, and we supported them for that.
Yeah, I think that's really interesting. I think it'd be good for everyone, including me. I'm really fascinated to know how much time, money, and effort goes into assessing ideas, but then also when you decide there is a clinical need for something, that's got to be an expensive process to decide that. So
absolutely. There are two realities here. One is product development, and that in itself is usually costly. It's not a cheap operation. The other piece of this is regulatory process. And regulators across the globe for medical devices don't look at the very specifics of the product, but rather at a family of products. So to give you an example, basically all medical devices that are manufactured, from invasive devices to a ear thermometer, are classified in 5 categories, and that's it. There is there's no, actually 6 categories. I forgot there's one little one. So 6 categories. So but they have some basic requirements, and whether it's something simple that is supposed to cost, say, £2 for $3.50, it has to go through a very rigorous process, just like if it was, for example, an MRI machine. So that process, it gets very expensive. Product development has another level adds another level of expense to it, and as part of the innovation, because you constantly have to be looking at different things, adding different abilities and characteristics to the equipment. We're about to release the new MCU software in the fall. To get a software from an idea to an actual product that will be installed, it has been close to $1 million in investment for software, between what we call hard cash, that it's what you are paying for certain services, programmers, etc., to the man hours that you dedicate to it. And it's not a short process, because again, when you attach it to the regulatory process, there are certain steps that you need to take along the way. So it slows down. So this is not creating a Sony PlayStation game that may take a group of developers 90, 120 days. It's you may be able to work for 90, 120 days, stop, then revise, go back, go forward, go through the process. So you want to make sure that that regulatory process becomes very short and relatively low cost. So it is a time consuming and capital intensive, very capital intensive.
I can imagine. So I'm sure you're very excited to see what impact Brexit has on the EU regulation.
Well, we found out yesterday that we are good in the UK with the European certificates until summer 2023.
Okay, well that's the first time I'm hearing that news.
Yeah,
that's a good bit of news.
Yeah, that was announced by the UK government. And so if you carry the CE mark, if you carry the right now it's called the MDD, the Medical Device Directive for the European Union, It was announced this past week that the intent of the British government is to grandfather those products until 2023. 2023, then there will be a British standard that people would have to obviously abide by and follow. But right now, it looks like barring any other political developments in the Brexit process, it looks like 2023 we're good. As long as you have it in place. You can't in 2021. You just can't say, oh, we're gonna bring a new product. Now they're not gonna accept that, and then they're developing the British standard. So you would have to go through that British process.
Okay, well, that's great. Have you got any more projects that are on the go at the moment that you may need to squeeze into that time beforehand?
Yes, and we are obviously within the spirit of the law and the regulations and following the guidelines. We have developed a couple of more products, and we are well down the road. I'm not ready to disclose those because it's not ready for market yet, but they will be disclosed in due time.
Yeah. And one of the things that I'm quite excited about, albeit it's strange at the moment and there's very little hands-on rehabilitation going on, there's very little elective work being done in the hospitals with our existing BTE users, but is that now that objectivity that the BTE equipment gives in terms of both the assessment but also that rehabilitation is going to become even more pivotal when you've got less time to spend with the patient. So what have you seen from the US perspective, but also from an international standpoint in how the COVID-19 pandemic?
I think the challenge is it's clearly there, and I think you expressed it very well. I think the general consensus is that this modality within the medical services, it requires, as most medical services are going to require, there's only so much you can do through telemedicine, but so it's going to require that interaction, that physical interaction, and with the proper safeguards. It is a medical delivery. It's safe medical delivery. You can go ahead and have rehab. So we're seeing in the United States a significant number of the clinics that have reopened. Certainly not at the same volume that they may have had 20 people at the same time. Maybe they have 5 to 10 at the same time, but they still go through that. They try to do some telemedicine. So there is a combination of both. But certainly in the end, there has to be that human to human interaction. So the proper safeguards are being undertaken. We in our office, for example, we have had that. We have decided that we would continue to work from home. Obviously, there is a production facility. That production facility stuff can only be made in one place. It's not something that you can go make this equipment at home. So as a way to protecting our production workers, we have requested the rest of our staff to refrain from coming to the office and work from home. We have provided the facilities. Now, some challenges to that, how you do training. So we have created a mini TV studio to be able to do that training so that people still have that interaction. But, we're trying to protect our production guys because ultimately, they are very good at what they do. And, what I do at BTE, you can go get somebody else to do it. But the last thing you want is to have Waldo Vazquez putting a Primus together. The Primus will be put together. It will pass quality control, but you may have to wait a little while before you get your unit made by Waldo Vazquez. So we're doing those things. But it's interesting you bring the COVID piece of this because that in itself has presented incredible opportunities for rehab professionals. We know from the research, not BTE's, ideas, but this is published research. The benefits of rehab during the patient's, so we say acute moments, where they are suffering from it, but also post release from care. And these are patients that, you know, at one point, initially in New York, the average patient that was entering ICU was in ICU for a period of anywhere between 19 to 23 days. Those who had ventilators were hooked to a ventilator up to, you know, an average 14 days. We all know what that type of inactivity does for the body, and we also know that there's an element here of pulmonary rehab. Pulmonary rehab, a lot of it has to do with movement. So having that strong physical rehabilitation, occupational rehabilitation element to it, it's key in the recovery of COVID patients. We now have more information, which is the lingering effects of COVID-19. So we have concentrated a lot into the eccentrics, on the primus, on the centron, in the centron units, making sure that patients who are weak, frail, who may not be in the biggest spirits. It's pretty shocking to hear the word COVID-19 and you testing positive to it. People get scared. It is to make sure that they keep moving, they keep exercising, so that that pulmonary rehab gets shortened, that there is no relapsing, that no other complications surface, something as simple as a pneumonia. So eccentric exercise and the modalities we use to deliver that have been well accepted by the rehab community. It allows patients to exercise at a higher load than they normally would. It allows patients to exercise and consume 80% less oxygen. So there's less taxing on a respiratory system at the time, but they're keeping the strength so that they can start moving again as quickly as possible, and they can then really take advantage of their pulmonary respiratory rehab. So it's been an interesting road, I got to tell you. You know, I wasn't so clear on the message back in February when all this was showing up in our desk, but I've seen it. I have talked to professionals both in the medical side as well as in the rehab side, so doctors, pulmonologists, et cetera. And there's some very interesting programs that have been going around right now, and some good data that is coming out.
I think so, and I think it's for the employers when they're welcoming these people back, obviously presuming that the virus has gone completely, knowing that they're physically strong enough to return to do that job is a key component, and that's where the BTE data plays a pivotal role.
Yeah, and this is something that you gradually step to. There is that component of being able to release somebody from the hospital sooner, so you free up a bed and the resources that person's consuming in a hospital environment. So the quicker you can get them home safely, the better it is for the medical delivery system. But the key word is there safely, so that they can then engage in an environment which they enjoy, which is their home, in activities they live in, which eventually graduates them, or steps them up to going back to work, and that in a safe manner. And that data-driven process, being able to measure objectively what the person's capable of doing from day one to the day he shows up at work or she shows up at work, it's key. And that's really the continuum that our products provide rehab specialists.
Yeah, no, that's really interesting. So we'll look forward to seeing how things develop both here and internationally. That's going to be very interesting to see that. From your perspective then, I know that you're working at home a lot. For a man that travels way more than half the year, how have you coped? But more importantly, how's your wife Barbara coped?
Well, Barbara and I just celebrated our 33rd wedding anniversary on July 31st. I have a daughter named Sophia who's 28. I have a son named Waldo who's 24. When they were born, the year that they were born, I've always been traveling with a domestically international. I slowed down my travel, and that first year after they were born, I spent quite a bit of time at home. I traveled very little. So taking Waldo's, which is my youngest, who's 24, in the past 23 years, my wife and I had not spent this much time together. I landed on March 2nd and today is September 10th. And we've been sharing the same roof, same internet. She's a teacher. She's been also teaching remotely. It is a very different lifestyle. I wasn't used to be at home. I was used to be running to an airport, going over here. But he has done wonders for my sleep. I've been able to establish a sleep pattern. I've been able to dedicate some time to exercising. While I always try to keep with exercise on the road, sometimes it's difficult. So now it's, at least 3 times a week I'll go out. I've maintained more or less my weight. I'll go up 2 and 3 pounds. But the doctor is happy. And frankly, the house looks better because Barbara has had put together, after 33 years of marriage, a long list of things that need to be done around the house. And I've been eating up at it, and it's been good. But yeah, he has required an adjustment for all of us in terms of what we do, how we approach it. But I think if I was going to really summarize what this has done at a personal level is, and I think this is really very common across the board, it made me stop and look and understand better the fragility of who we are. And I'm not talking about my family now. I'm talking about who we are, people like you, Andy, people like, your parents, your brother, your nephews, the friends that I made through the years in the UK, in the different facilities across the globe, my coworkers. I think that understanding that fragility, hopefully, it's making me and making everybody else, better people, better citizens. So I think that's my biggest take out of this at a personal level. But Barbara's happy. So she's still in the house, and we're starting our 34th wedding anniversary celebration now, so that come next July is just the conclusion of 34 years. So
yeah, well, no, definitely congratulations on that, and maybe I'll ask Barbara separately what she
may have a different opinion. Absolutely.
And how's the golf swing? Has that been getting some good?
That has not had that much activity. I think I played twice this entire summer. 2 times, that's it. Just haven't had the time for it. Both times played excellent, so looking forward. At a personal level, I did have a trip to Scotland to go play golf in April, and we all know what happened. US, UK, everything was closed, and we had to cancel that trip. And we're hoping that we'll be able to do it again in April of 2021. Head up to Scotland and visit some of the courses up there. Wouldn't be my first time, but looking forward to it.
I I'm mentioning memorable things then that you've done. Then, what would you any particular experiences or any travels within your BTE work that you've found fascinating from a work or a personal perspective? Do not feel obliged to mention me or the UK in that, but feel free to as well if you'd like.
This may sound a little bit cliche or corny, but I think in the end, we are herding animals. So we belong to a big herd, and we like to be associated with people. But always people ask me that, I go back to 2 events in my life during the travels. One is related to the incredible impact and the difference that we can make in other people. And the other one is the failure of not acting and not making the impact on people. So I'm going to start with the first story. Seeing breast cancer survivors exercise on a primary system, and that breast cancer survivors turning around to me after I was invited to see what they were doing and look at me and say, you, meaning me as the representative of the company, of the equipment that they were using, is the first time in the past 4 months that somebody has told me that I'm getting better. And that was just simply the chart, the progress chart in doing the exercise. This woman 4 months before had received the news of breast cancer and had gone through chemo, radiation, surgeries, and all the emotional and physical scars that creates. That was very impactful. Having the ability to see an elderly patient who had a hip replacement and had struggled through the rehab until they engaged with a team that also had a primus, and having that day standing there and having another colleague of mine with me, Helena Obrevsky, and she asking the couple, what do you enjoy the most? The wife jumping in and saying, I get to walk with him again. Every afternoon we walk, and I get to do this again. So that's a great impact. Our inaction or inability to do things when need to be done is also something that it's created a huge memory during the past 15 years. Walking down the streets of Calcutta, and being, being witness to extreme poverty and misery. Just like today, I typically wear 2 shirts, an undershirt and a shirt outside. And seeing another human being not having enough to have a shirt on, that was very impactful. But what really impacted me was my inaction. About 20 minutes later, I remember that I wore 2 shirts. And I never thought about taking one of those 2 shirts off and giving it to that person. So, so when I look at the BTE experience or my life experience, I look at those two poles in the, and I say, wow, here's what action can do, and this is the consequence of inaction. So to me, that really answers the best way your question.
Yeah, no, definitely. There's some amazing stories in there. I'm just glad you didn't mention watching Iceland knock England out of the Euros in my front room, because that was.
I certainly it's a moment that would always be remembered, as well as meeting your lovely parents and questioning what happened.
Yeah, moving swiftly on from that one. Yeah, no, great. I've really enjoyed talking to you about this side. But is there anything else that you would like to share, whether it's from the BTE side, or what are the plans for the future? For where do you see the company going?
Well, it's very challenging, the environment right now, and not necessarily because of COVID, but because of the ever-changing nature of funding. Obviously, this is all great conversation, but there is an expense to this, and funding is really the biggest challenge for us as a company. It is, how do we deliver how do we meet the demands of the patient population, and an ever expanding service, because rehab, if I look at the traditional view of rehab, an event happened and then there's a reaction to it. Rehab is moving into a very proactive element, and that is making sure that people who suffer from chronic diseases, for example, diabetes, engage themselves in a lifestyle that includes the services of physical therapists and occupational therapists, rehab specialists. Well, today's calling rehab specialists, that maybe in about 15, 20 years, they won't even have that name, rehab specialists, because they're moving into this preventive angle, or making sure that certain conditions do not expand in the population. We are all aging population. Very few countries are considered very young population, but if you look at the whole of the UK, Europe, the United States, certainly Japan, we are an aging population. So, and we are living longer. I just, this week has been a week of birthdays in my family. My Barbara's brother, my brother-in-law Jay, just turned 70, September 3rd. One of my sisters just turned 62, September 8th. I'm sure they're happy that I'm sharing their age with everybody. But again, I look at somebody who's 70. I look at my sister who's 62, my brother-in-law who's 70, and in no way, shape, or form is the same 70-year-old person that when I was 10 years old, or 45 years ago, 50 years ago, and I was looking at somebody who was 70. That was unheard of. So my brother-in-law is a very active guy. He rides his bicycle. He goes swimming. He has a very active lifestyle. My sister, still works full time. And then I go back to the experience of my parents. They're both alive. They're relatively active lifestyle. My mother-in-law, who died at age 90, who was extremely active, lived by herself until 3 or 4 months before she passed away. You got to meet her, Andy. It was that element of it is how do we deliver services as they move forward, and the challenge against funding available. The NHS is no different than private hospitals here in the United States, big chain hospitals like Johns Hopkins or MedStar, Health South or Select Medical. They all have the same challenges, and that is it's funding. So our objective is to be able to maintain and deliver and bring the value that is necessary for those operations. And that's a lot of it's going to be data driven. A place like NHS is going to want to know that if they're going to invest X number of pounds in a piece of equipment, that piece of equipment not only is it being used, but who's using it, what is it being used for, what are the uses we could get out of this? Because in the end, the NHS mission is to serve a population, and that service is not only for the medical side, but also using those investment in a wise fashion. So that's really the challenge that we have, and that's where we're aiming with our product development. And it is be able to provide that data that right now is not available. Who's using the equipment? What is it being used for? How many hours a day this equipment is being engaged? What's the population that this hospital is seeing, or what's the population that this hospital is treating with this machine? Do they see populations that in other hospitals are being treated in hospital B with a BTE equipment, but it's not being treated on hospital A, even though they see the same population? Why is that? Is it a lack of training? Is it a lack of knowledge? Is it a lack of time? Is it a lack of staff? And those questions need to be answered. Right now, getting that data is very difficult. So trying to develop products that do that is going to be key. That's on the administrative side. On the patient experience side, we need to improve that patient engagement. That patient needs to be able to go to a place that says, I can't get this anywhere else. My PT, my OT, my rehab specialist team, it's key to my health and my well-being. And they need to be able to engage with that piece of equipment that is just not 800 pounds of steel. It's gotta create something for them. So that immediate interaction is key. Popular culture, and one of the great exports of the UK to the United States is acting, and we have a great actor that from the UK that developed a show here in the United States called House. And we're all aware of it, and very popular. And House resolves the most mysterious medical questions in 44 minutes, an hour, including the advertising. And that's the expectation, that there is that kind of interaction, that there's that kind of knowledge, that there's a solution, at least there's a path to recovery. And that patient experience is going to be key. So those two elements is really the challenge for manufacturers of medical devices. You can make a device that does everything on planet Earth, Is it a product that people could afford, that systems could afford? No. And you gotta go looking into something that works out. You can produce the biggest, best equipment out there. Is it something that a patient want to use? No. Then it's not really going to solve that many issues. So it's a fine balance. You gotta tune it up the right way.
Great. I think it's going to be very interesting to see how things do pan out, and always look forward to see the developments that you guys are working on. So we're coming up to the end of time, sadly.
Okay.
I've got one
Okay.
final question for you. So come December, who is going to be the president of the US?
Well, I don't know if we'll know in December.
Right. Well, who is going to be the next president of that? And I want like one sentence and what you thought. Who is it going to be, and what you thought?
I'm gonna answer the question in a very American way. I can only tell you who most likely will win the state of Maryland,
Right.
because I have no idea how people in Texas will vote, and Texas will decide their own way. And because, as you may know, well, we have a very unique way of selecting our presidents. It's not popular vote, but who wins the majority of states in terms of the electoral votes that come from that state, and that's based on the population. So I can tell you in the state of Maryland, without any hesitation and without endorsement of anybody, is that Joe Biden will carry the state of Maryland. And that's my home state. And then other states are going to have to make their own decisions, the residents of those states, and whether with the exception of one state, it's a winner takes all. So everybody else, actually two states, all the other 48 states, it's winner takes all. So if you win by one vote, or if you win by 10 million votes that state, you get all the electoral colleges of that. So that is my political answer to your political question.
Well, yeah, that's a good way to finish. So thank you, Waldo. I also, before we do go, I want to guarantee to all of our existing and new customers that Waldo doesn't make the BTE Primus systems, and more importantly to Alan as well. Alan will be very relieved to hear that you're not making them there. You could do, but
yeah. And for those of you who know me, yes, I'm at home. I'm in my office at home, and no, I don't typically wear a jacket at home, but I thought it would be, you guys are important enough that, hey, let's dress up. But again, thank you for the time. Hopefully you've learned something out of this conversation. If you have any questions, if you want to reach out to me, W. Vazquez at bttechnologies.com. You can reach me out or reach out to Andy, and we'll be more than happy to help you, hear from you. And for those, especially those in the UK, we'll be back. We are going to start traveling soon enough, right after the vaccine, and I look forward to the great cuisine of the British Isles.
yeah, no, we're definitely looking forward to having you back. So thank you, Waldo, and we will hope to speak to you very soon.
All right, take care, Andy.
Thank you.
All right, goodbye. You have to.
Very good.